Hola, I am Katia, and I am so glad that you're here again. The story I am sharing today surfaced during a conversation that I had with neurodivergent friends, and we were talking about how, even as children, we were expected to behave in ways that didn't feel natural to our bodies. Like when we had to sit perfectly still in classrooms when we actually needed to move, or being allowed to speak only when we were given permission, even though our voices wanted to express freely, or hiding our feelings so that we will be seen as good, quiet, and well behaved. And as we spoke, a memory that I had buried deep inside me resurfaced. In high school, we were told to bring frogs for a biology class. And I brought mine thinking we would be learning about her life. But when I arrived, they told us to dissect her. I didn't know until that moment what we were going to do. She was still alive inside a small plastic container. And I froze. I cried. I refused. And I failed that class. And my classmates laughed and they were saying, "She's too sensitive, too emotional, too much." And something inside me began to shut down. I started to believe that in order to belong, I had to really hide my tenderness, disconnect from what I felt, and perform strength even when every part of me said no. And that pattern didn't end in high school. It followed me to university, to workplaces, to every space labeled as professional. I sat still when my body needed movement. I appeared composed even when I was overwhelmed. And I silenced my sensory knowing, just to survive in systems that were never built for me. And I know that I am not alone in this. Many of us, especially those who are neurodivergent, disabled, racialized, gender-expansive, or otherwise marginalized, we have learned to disconnect from ourselves as a way to survive. Not because we are weak, but because that disconnection became necessary. And so many of us learn to wear masks. Masks of composure, of being fine, of holding it all together, masks of strength, until we couldn't anymore, or until those masks no longer fit. We learn to perform what was expected until that performance became a cage. And for a while, it helped us survive. But survival came with a cost. But what was the cost? What do we lose when we ignore what our bodies already know? What if knowledge is not just in our mind, but in our senses, our emotions, and our lived experiences? What if emotions are wisdom and not a sign of weakness? And what if stillness is not the only form of intelligence? And what we are talking here is not just about frogs or classrooms. It's about the values that modern colonial system teach us to normalize. Distance over closeness, control over connection, domination over relationship. And in many parts of the Western world, we may start to internalize these values, not only on how we move and speak, but also in how we see each other, how we use our language, and how we tell our histories. And we may also start to internalize them very quietly too, like in how we judge ourselves, how we rush, and how we silence and override our sensing and our inner knowing. And even innocent words or gestures may carry deep harm regardless of the intention. And without realizing it, we may begin to replicate dominance in how we speak, how we consume media, in our relationships, in our institutions, and even in our daily choices. But what if there is another way? What if the stories we were given are not the only ones we can live by? And in my work, I guide people, including myself actually, because unlearning and learning is not a one-time thing. This is an ongoing practice. And together we begin to notice all of these patterns that we have been taught to normalize and the many ways that we have been conditioned to disconnect. So we start to notice internalized supremacy and all the ways that we may be replicating dominance over others, over ourselves, and even within our communities and in spaces that claim to care. And together, we begin to notice how colonial and modern patterns may live inside us, in our pace, in internalized pressure, in our disconnection. And we begin to reclaim how we relate, not just to ourselves, but to each other and to the more than human world. Slowly, we return to something softer, more relational, more alive. And this way of noticing, of becoming more sensitive to the patterns that we have been taking for granted, is what I call la mirada atenta, or the attentive gaze. This is not a brand or a concept, it is an invitation to feel and to notice and to relate differently. And in my previous video, I shared the story of La Rana Dorada, who is a sacred Panamanian toad who no longer lives freely in the wild. And today's story came later, but it taught me something essential, that honoring our tenderness, our refusal, our inner knowing is an act of remembering what modernity and coloniality have tried to erase, of remembering relationship over domination. And I didn't have the words back then, but I have them now. And I don't share this as a universal truth, but as an invitation for anyone who senses that something within this system is not okay. And if that is you, and you are longing for deeper connection and accountability, you are so welcome here. Thank you so much for being here again, and for pausing with me, for remembering, and for honoring what your body already knows. Con mucho amor y cariño, Katia.